Why you keep repeating the same mistakes. Introduction. Every decision you've made today felt like your choice. But what if most of those decisions were made long before you became aware of them? Deep inside your mind is a hidden program built from years of habits, beliefs, fears, and experiences. That invisible program quietly shapes your confidence, your relationships, your success, and even the opportunities you believe you deserve. Today, you're going to learn how to rewrite it. Have you ever promised yourself that this time will be different? This time you'll stop procrastinating. You'll finally become disciplined. You'll stop overthinking. You'll stop choosing the wrong people. You'll stop doubting yourself. Yet somehow, weeks or months later, you find yourself standing in the exact same place, asking the same question. Why does this keep happening to me? The answer isn't a lack of intelligence. It isn't laziness. And it certainly isn't because you're incapable of changing. The real reason is far less obvious. Your subconscious mind is designed to protect what feels familiar, even when what's familiar is keeping you unhappy. It would rather repeat a painful pattern it already knows than risk a future it cannot predict. That's why people sabotage opportunities they've worked hard to earn. Why they return to unhealthy relationships they promised never to revisit. Why they abandon goals that genuinely matter to them. And why they keep becoming the same person, even while desperately trying to build a different life. The subconscious doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what it has learned to believe. The encouraging news is that those beliefs aren't permanent. Your brain has a remarkable ability to adapt throughout your life. Every repeated thought strengthens certain mental pathways, and every intentional action can begin creating new ones. The same mind that learned fear can learn confidence. The same mind that learned limitation can learn possibility. In this audiobook, you'll discover why your subconscious repeats the same patterns, how those hidden programs were formed, and most importantly, how to replace them with beliefs and habits that support the life you actually want. By the end, you'll understand that lasting change doesn't begin with forcing yourself to try harder. It begins by changing the invisible code that's been quietly running your life all along. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The invisible program running your life. Most people don't have a motivation problem. They have a memory problem. Not the kind that makes you forget names or birthdays. A much deeper kind. Your mind remembers patterns. It remembers what felt safe, what felt dangerous, what brought approval, and what led to pain. Those memories become invisible instructions, quietly guiding your life long after you've forgotten where they came from. That's why two people can face the same opportunity and make completely different decisions. One sees possibility. The other sees risk. One walks into the room, believing they belong. The other spends the entire time wondering if everyone can see they're not good enough. Neither person consciously chose those thoughts. Their subconscious chose them long before the moment arrived. This is one of the strangest truths about being human. You don't experience life exactly as it is. You experience life through the filters your subconscious has built over many years. Those filters decide what you notice, what you ignore, what you fear, what you chase. And until you recognize those filters, you'll mistake them for reality. Think about the last time you overreacted to something small. Perhaps someone replied to your message with only one word. Instantly, your mind started creating stories. They're upset with me. I must have done something wrong. They don't like me anymore. A few hours later, you discovered they were simply busy. The situation never changed. Only the story did. The subconscious is always trying to finish incomplete stories. It fills empty spaces with old beliefs. If your mind has learned to expect rejection, it will often find rejection. Even where none exists, if it has learned to expect failure, it will quietly collect evidence that confirms it. Not because it's trying to hurt you, because it wants to be right. That might sound strange, but your subconscious values consistency more than happiness. It would rather protect an old identity than create a better future. That's why change feels uncomfortable. Not because change is dangerous, because it challenges everything your subconscious believes is familiar. Have you noticed how quickly people return to old habits after making big promises? Someone decides they're finally going to get healthy. For a week, they wake up early. They exercise. They eat better. They feel proud. Then one difficult day arrives. Stress builds. Energy drops. Without even thinking, they return to the same food, the same excuses, and the same routine they were trying to escape. Later they blame themselves. I have no discipline. I always quit. But discipline wasn't the real problem. Identity was. The old version of themselves was still alive beneath the new habits. And identity always wins in the long run. This is why so many people feel trapped. They try to change their behavior while protecting the beliefs that created the behavior in the first place. It's like repainting a house whose foundation is slowly collapsing. The outside looks different. The structure underneath remains the same. The subconscious doesn't care what goals you've written in a notebook. It asks only one question. Is this who we are? If the answer is no, it quietly pulls you back toward what feels familiar, even if familiar means unhappy, even if familiar means broke, even if familiar means lonely. This invisible pull explains something that confuses millions of people. Why do intelligent people make foolish decisions repeatedly? Why do capable people keep doubting themselves? Why do kind people remain in relationships that slowly destroy their confidence? The answer usually isn't a lack of knowledge. It's emotional familiarity. Human beings are often attracted to what feels familiar before they're attracted to what's healthy. Someone who grew up constantly seeking approval may spend years chasing people who never fully accept them, not because they enjoy rejection, because deep inside, the struggle feels normal. The subconscious whispers, "This feels like home," even when home was painful. That's one of the hardest truths to accept. The past doesn't disappear simply because time passes. If it isn't understood, it quietly becomes your future. But here's something even more fascinating. The subconscious isn't your enemy. It's your protector. It learned its job when you were young. Every disappointment became data. Every success became evidence. Every criticism became a warning. Every compliment became a clue. Your subconscious wasn't asking, "Is this true?" It was asking, "Will believing this keep us safe?" Children rarely question what they repeatedly hear. If a child constantly hears they're too quiet, they may grow into an adult who never speaks when their voice matters most. If they're praised only when they achieve, they may spend decades believing they're valuable only when they're productive. If they experience unpredictable love, they may later confuse anxiety with attraction. Years pass. The child grows older. But the programming quietly remains. This is why two people can hear the exact same criticism. One says, "I'll learn from this." The other thinks, "I knew I wasn't good enough." The words were identical. The subconscious interpretation was completely different. Your life isn't shaped only by what happens to you. It's shaped by what your subconscious believes those events mean. And meaning changes everything. A failed interview can become proof that you'll never succeed. Or it can become the lesson that prepares you for something better. The event is the same. The subconscious interpretation creates two entirely different futures. Here's where life becomes interesting. Most people spend years trying to control their circumstances. Very few spend time understanding the mind that's interpreting those circumstances. They change jobs, cities, relationships, friends, goals. But wherever they go, their subconscious goes with them. The scenery changes. The patterns stay the same. That's why some people seem to live the same year over and over again. Different calendar. Same fears. Same reactions. Same arguments. Same excuses. Different faces. Same story. If that feels uncomfortably familiar, don't lose hope. Recognition isn't failure. Recognition is the beginning of freedom. The moment you notice a pattern, you've already stepped outside it. For perhaps the first time, you're no longer completely controlled by it. Awareness creates a small space, a pause between the trigger and the reaction, and inside that pause, a different future becomes possible. You don't have to fight your subconscious. You have to teach it, patiently, repeatedly, the same way it learned the first time. One new thought, one new action, one new decision at a time. Here's something you can do before this day ends. Pay attention to one automatic reaction. Just one. Perhaps you criticize yourself after making a small mistake. Perhaps you immediately assume the worst. Perhaps you hesitate before speaking because you think your opinion doesn't matter. Don't try to change it yet. Simply notice it. Ask yourself one gentle question. Where did I first learn to think this way? Don't rush to answer. Just become curious. Because curiosity is something fear cannot survive for long. And that single question may reveal a belief you've carried for years without realizing it. The greatest prison isn't made of walls. It's made of unquestioned thoughts. The moment you begin questioning them, the door quietly starts to open. And once that door opens, you'll discover something even more surprising. Many of the beliefs you call your personality were never truly yours to begin with. They were inherited, learned, repeated. In the next chapter, we'll uncover where those invisible programs came from, why your earliest years still shape your decisions today, and how beliefs formed decades ago continue influencing the life you're living now, even when you think you've left the past behind. Chapter 2. The first story you ever believed. Long before you knew your own name, your mind was already deciding who you were, not because anyone sat you down and explained life to you, but because your subconscious was quietly watching faces, listening to voices, feeling emotions, looking for one answer above all others. What do I have to become to be safe here? That question has followed you ever since. Most people believe their personality is something they were born with, but personality is often a collection of adaptations. Some people became quiet because speaking up led to criticism. Some became perfectionists because mistakes were never tolerated. Some became people pleasers because love seemed to disappear whenever someone was disappointed. And some learned to hide every emotion because showing weakness felt dangerous. Years later, those adaptations feel so natural that they no longer seem like choices. They feel like identity. That's the quiet power of the subconscious. It doesn't simply remember experiences. It builds a version of you that it believes can survive them. The strange part is that survival and happiness are not the same thing. Your subconscious is not trying to create the happiest version of you. It's trying to create the safest version. Sometimes those are the same person. Often they are not. Think about someone who is terrified of failure. They may spend hours preparing for every meeting. They may work harder than everyone else. From the outside, they look disciplined. Inside, something very different is happening. They're not chasing success. They're running from shame. The behavior looks healthy. The emotion driving it isn't. This is why understanding yourself matters more than judging yourself. The same action can come from two completely different places. One person exercises because they love taking care of their body. Another exercises because they secretly believe they are never enough. The habit looks identical. The subconscious story is completely different, and stories shape everything. Here's something that surprises many people. Your subconscious rarely remembers exact events. It remembers emotional conclusions. Perhaps no one ever told you. Your opinions don't matter. But every time you try to speak and were interrupted, every time your excitement was dismissed, every time someone laughed before you finished explaining, your subconscious quietly reached its own conclusion. It's safer to stay quiet. No one needed to say the words. Your mind finished the sentence on its own. That's how beliefs are born, not in one dramatic moment, but through hundreds of ordinary moments that slowly point in the same direction. A child drops a glass. An adult reacts with anger. The child doesn't only remember the broken glass. They remember the feeling, the fear, the tension, the silence afterward. Years later, they become an adult who apologizes constantly, not because they keep making mistakes, because somewhere inside, mistakes still feel dangerous. This is how the past hides inside the present, not as memories, as reactions. Have you ever noticed how quickly certain situations change your mood? A simple disagreement suddenly feels overwhelming. Someone raises their voice, and your heart starts racing. A small rejection feels much bigger than it should. You tell yourself, why am I reacting like this? The answer is rarely found in the present moment. The present simply awakens something older. Life has a curious way of pressing old buttons with new fingers. Different people, same emotional response. Different places, same fear, different conversations. Same insecurity. Until you recognize a pattern, you may spend years blaming today's events for yesterday's wounds. This is why some people leave one unhealthy relationship only to enter another that feels strangely familiar. Different face, different personality, same emotional experience. It isn't because they're choosing pain. It's because the subconscious often mistakes familiarity for safety. It quietly says, "We've survived this before," even if surviving came at the cost of peace. That realization can be uncomfortable, but it can also be incredibly freeing. Because once you see the pattern, you stop believing it's fate. You realize it's programming, and programming can be changed. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. At first, every movement required your full attention. Balancing felt impossible. Turning felt awkward. Stopping felt frightening. Then something changed. After enough repetition, your subconscious took over. Now you don't think about balancing. You simply do it. Beliefs work the same way. Repeat a thought long enough. Repeat an emotion often enough. Repeat an experience enough times. Eventually, your subconscious says, "I'll handle this from now on." That's wonderful when a belief helps you. It's heartbreaking when it doesn't, because now you're living automatically. The encouraging news is this: the same mind that learned fear can learn courage. The same mind that learned self-doubt can learn self-trust. The same subconscious that accepted limiting beliefs without your permission can also accept empowering beliefs through intentional repetition. But there is one mistake many people make. They try to erase the past. That almost never works. The goal isn't to pretend difficult experiences never happened. The goal is to give them a different meaning. Someone once said that we cannot change the first chapter of our story, but we can decide how the rest of the story is written. Your subconscious doesn't need a perfect past. It needs a wiser interpretation of it. Perhaps what felt like rejection taught you independence. Perhaps failure taught resilience. Perhaps loneliness taught compassion. Perhaps uncertainty taught courage. The event may never change. Its meaning can. And when meaning changes, the future quietly changes with it. Here's something simple you can try today. Take a piece of paper. Write down one belief you often hear inside your own mind. Maybe it's, "I'm always behind. I'm not confident. People always leave. Nothing ever works out for me." Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, who first taught me this? Don't blame anyone. This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about discovering where the belief began. Then ask a second question. Is this belief still helping me? Many people never ask that question. They carry old beliefs the way travelers carry heavy suitcases long after the journey has ended. Not because they need them, because they've forgotten they can put them down. The moment you question an old belief, something remarkable happens. It loses a little of its power. Not all at once, but enough to create space. And inside that space, a new belief can begin to grow. The subconscious isn't rewritten in one extraordinary moment. It's rewritten in thousands of ordinary ones. One healthier thought, one different response, one courageous decision. Repeat it until it becomes familiar, because what feels unfamiliar today can become your new normal tomorrow. And in the next chapter, you'll discover the force that quietly protects every old belief you've ever carried, even when you consciously want to change. It is the invisible guardian of your identity, and until you understand how it works, real transformation will always feel just out of reach. Chapter 3. Your mind protects the person you believe you are. The greatest obstacle to change isn't your habits. It's your identity. You can wake up tomorrow with a new plan, a new journal, a new workout routine, a new budget, a new promise to yourself. For a few days, everything feels different. You feel motivated. Hope returns. You begin to believe this time will finally be different. Then something quietly pulls you backward. Not all at once. Just enough to miss one workout. Delay one important task. Spend money you promised to save. Reply to someone you knew wasn't good for you. A week later, the excitement fades, and you wonder what happened. It feels like your motivation disappeared. But motivation wasn't what failed. Your identity quietly restored the version of you it recognized. This is one of the hidden jobs of the subconscious. It protects consistency, not success, not happiness, consistency. If you believe for years that you're shy, your subconscious will notice every awkward conversation and quietly ignore the moments when you were confident. If you believed you're unlucky, it will remember every disappointment while overlooking every opportunity that went well. It becomes less interested in discovering the truth and more interested in proving that your existing story is correct. That can sound frustrating. Until you realize something remarkable. The same system that protects limiting beliefs can also protect empowering ones. The problem isn't that your subconscious defends your identity. The problem is the identity it has been asked to defend. Think about a thermostat in a house. You can open the windows, light a fire, turn on a fan, but if the thermostat is set to 20 degrees, it keeps adjusting the temperature until the room returns to what it believes is normal. Your subconscious works in much the same way. Your habits are the weather. Your identity is the thermostat. Most people spend their lives changing the weather. Very few change the setting. That's why temporary change is common. Permanent change is rare. Have you ever met someone who loses weight only to gain it all back? Or someone who finally starts making more money but somehow ends up struggling financially again? Or someone who leaves a toxic relationship only to find themselves in another one that feels strangely familiar? From the outside, those situations look unrelated. Deep underneath, they often have the same cause. The person's circumstances changed. Their identity did not. The subconscious kept guiding them back toward what felt normal. This explains something many people misunderstand about confidence. They believe confident people simply think more positive thoughts. Usually that's not true. Confident people often see the same challenges everyone else sees. The difference is the story they tell themselves. Someone with a fragile identity thinks, if I fail, it proves I'm not good enough. Someone with a healthy identity thinks, if I fail, I learn something useful. The event is identical. The identity transforms its meaning. That meaning becomes the emotion. The emotion becomes the action. The action becomes the result. Everything begins with the story. And stories are surprisingly stubborn, not because they're true, because they're familiar. If you spent years believing you're always overlooked, compliments may feel uncomfortable. You might dismiss them, explain them away, or secretly believe the other person is simply being polite, not because you dislike praise, because praise doesn't fit the identity your subconscious has been protecting. It quietly whispers, this doesn't sound like us. Now think about the opposite. Someone who genuinely believes they are capable doesn't become arrogant every time they succeed. They simply accept success as something that belongs in their life. It feels natural. That's an important word. Natural. Your subconscious is always trying to make your life match what feels natural. The question is, what currently feels natural to you? Does peace feel natural? Or does your mind become suspicious whenever life gets too quiet? Does success feel natural? Or do you instinctively expect something to go wrong? Does love feel natural? Or do you find yourself waiting for disappointment even when everything seems fine? These questions matter because your subconscious is always trying to return you to emotional familiarity. Sometimes people unknowingly create problems simply because peace feels unfamiliar. Without realizing it, they overthink. They assume the worst. They start unnecessary arguments, not because they enjoy conflict, because conflict feels like home. The silence of peace feels strange. This is why changing your identity requires more than changing your behavior. You have to become comfortable with a new emotional normal. That takes patience. Think about learning a new language. At first, every word feels awkward. You hesitate before speaking. You translate everything in your head. But after enough repetition, something shifts. The language becomes familiar. You stop translating. You simply understand. A new identity grows the same way. At first, saying, I am becoming confident, may feel unnatural, not because it's false, because it's unfamiliar. The subconscious doesn't reject new beliefs because they're impossible. It rejects them because they haven't been repeated enough. Most people quit right there. They mistake discomfort for failure. They think, this doesn't feel like me. Exactly. Not yet. Every meaningful transformation begins by feeling slightly unfamiliar. The person you're becoming cannot feel natural until you've practiced becoming them. Here's something worth remembering. You don't wake up one morning as a completely different person. You collect evidence. Every small promise you keep becomes evidence. Every difficult conversation you don't avoid becomes evidence. Every healthy decision repeated consistently becomes evidence. Slowly, your subconscious begins updating the story, not because you forced it, because you've shown it something new often enough that it can no longer ignore the evidence. Eventually, your identity quietly changes. And once identity changes, many behaviors no longer require discipline. They become expressions of who you believe you are. This is why real transformation often looks boring. There are no dramatic breakthroughs every day. No constant waves of motivation. Just quiet consistency. Small decisions. Repeated over and over until the extraordinary becomes ordinary. Before this day ends, try one simple exercise. Complete this sentence honestly. The kind of person I believe I am is... Don't write who you wish you were. Write what you genuinely believe. Then read it carefully. Ask yourself, is this description based on who I truly am or on who I repeatedly believed I had to be? That single question can uncover beliefs you've carried for decades without ever choosing them consciously. Because here's the truth. Your identity isn't carved into stone. It's written in pencil. It can be revised, not by wishing, not by pretending, but by consistently giving your subconscious new evidence about who you are becoming. And that leads us to one of the most powerful discoveries in this entire journey. Even after you choose a new identity, one invisible force continues pulling you toward your old life. Most people don't even realize it's happening, yet it quietly shapes every decision they make. In the next chapter, you'll uncover that force, the hidden language your subconscious listens to every single day, and why the conversations you have with yourself are programming your future far more than the conversations you have with anyone else. Chapter 4. The Voice You Never Escape. The person who speaks to you the most is someone no one else can hear. That conversation begins before you fully wake up and often continues long after the day is over. It follows you into meetings, relationships, quiet walks, difficult decisions, and sleepless nights. Most of the time, you don't even notice it's happening. Because you've heard that voice for so long, it no longer sounds like a voice. It sounds like the truth. That is one of the greatest tricks the subconscious ever learns. It takes repeated thoughts and slowly disguises them as facts. You stop saying, I think I'm not confident. Instead, you begin saying, I'm just not a confident person. Notice the difference. One sentence leaves room for change. The other closes a door before change even has a chance to knock. This is how the subconscious writes invisible rules. Not all at once. One sentence at a time. Think about a child learning to write. The first letters are uneven. The words are slow. Every line requires effort. But after enough repetition, handwriting becomes automatic. Thoughts work the same way. The first time you think, I'm not good enough, it's just a thought. The 100th time, it begins to feel like part of your identity. Not because it became true, because it became familiar. Here's something worth noticing. Your subconscious doesn't carefully separate jokes from beliefs. If you constantly laugh and say, I'm terrible with money, I'm always late, I can never stay disciplined, your conscious mind may recognize the humor. Your subconscious simply hears repetition. And repetition is its favorite teacher. This is why the words you casually speak about yourself matter far more than most people realize. Every repeated sentence becomes another line of code. Slowly, quietly, without asking for permission. Have you ever met someone who apologized before they even spoke? Someone who began every opinion with, this might be a stupid idea. Or, I'm probably wrong, but... Listen carefully, and you'll hear something deeper than politeness. You'll hear a subconscious expectation. Long before anyone else responds, they've already assumed their voice carries less value. That assumption didn't begin that morning. It was practiced for years. The opposite is true as well. Some people walk into a room with quiet confidence, not because they believe they'll always be right, but because somewhere inside they've learned that their voice deserves to exist. Confidence isn't always loud. Often, it's simply the absence of constant self-doubt. This raises an important question. Where does that inner voice come from? At first, it wasn't yours. It borrowed words from parents, teachers, friends, classmates, strangers, moments of praise, moments of embarrassment, moments you barely remember. Over time, those outside voices slowly moved inside. Eventually, you stopped hearing them as someone else's opinions. You started hearing them as your own. That's why change in your life sometimes feels like arguing with yourself. One part of you wants to grow. Another part quietly says, "Who do you think you are?" One part wants to take the opportunity. The other whispers, "Don't embarrass yourself." One part believes things can improve. The other reminds you of every time they didn't. Neither voice is trying to destroy you. They're trying to protect different versions of you. One protects your future. The other protects your past. The question is, which one have you been feeding? Most people assume thoughts simply appear, but thoughts are often invited. The books you read, the conversations you repeat, the people you spend time with, the videos you watch every day, the music that constantly plays in the background. Each one quietly contributes to the language your subconscious learns to speak. Your mind is always listening, even when you aren't. Think about someone who spends years surrounded by people who complain about everything. Money is always impossible. Successful people are always dishonest. Life is always unfair. Without realizing it, those ideas begin sounding normal, not because they're accurate, because they're familiar. Now place that same person in a room filled with people who constantly ask, "What can we learn? What's the opportunity? How do we improve?" At first, the conversations feel unusual, maybe even uncomfortable. Then something begins to shift. Their inner voice slowly changes, not through force, through exposure. The subconscious is always collecting evidence about what is normal. Choose your environment carefully. It eventually becomes your internal dialogue. There's another habit that quietly shapes your subconscious: paying attention to what goes right. Most minds naturally focus on problems. It made sense thousands of years ago. Our ancestors survived by noticing danger. But the same brain that once protected us from predators now spends hours replaying awkward conversations, worrying about tomorrow, or reliving yesterday's mistakes. The subconscious starts believing life is mostly made of problems because problems receive most of your attention. Attention is a form of instruction. Whatever you consistently notice becomes more important to your mind. That's why two people can live almost identical lives and experience completely different realities. One notices every inconvenience. The other notices every opportunity. Neither life is perfect. Their focus creates the difference. This doesn't mean pretending difficulties don't exist. It means refusing to let difficulties become the only language your subconscious understands. Here's something simple you can begin doing today. For the rest of this day, listen to yourself as though you're listening to someone you deeply care about. Pay attention to every sentence that begins with, "I always," "I never," "I can't." That's just who I am. Don't judge yourself. Just notice. Then pause and gently ask, would I say these words to someone I truly wanted to help? If the answer is no, why keep saying them to yourself? Changing your inner voice doesn't require pretending life is perfect. It begins with replacing unnecessary certainty with honest possibility. Instead of saying, "I'll never change," try, "I'm still learning." Instead of, "I'm not disciplined," try, "I'm becoming someone who keeps promises to myself." The difference seems small. To the subconscious, it is enormous, because one sentence describes a prison, the other describes a path. Every day, your inner voice is casting votes for the person you will become. One thought isn't decisive. One conversation won't define your future. But thousands of conversations quietly shape your identity. And identity quietly shapes your destiny. The beautiful part is this: you don't have to silence the old voice overnight. You simply have to become intentional about strengthening a wiser one. Over time, the voice that once filled you with doubt becomes quieter, not because you fought it, because you stop giving it the final word. But even after your inner voice begins to change, something remarkable happens. Your subconscious starts testing whether your new beliefs are real. It creates moments where your old habits try to return, moments that feel almost impossible to resist. Most people mistake those moments for failure. In truth, they are something entirely different. In the next chapter, you'll discover why your mind keeps pulling you back toward old patterns, how habits become invisible chains, and a surprisingly simple way to break them without relying on endless motivation. Chapter 5. Why Your Old Habits Keep Finding You. The hardest habits to break are often the ones you don't realize you're repeating. Most people think of habits as obvious things. Checking your phone too often, eating when you're not hungry, procrastinating, staying up too late. But the habits that shape your life the most are rarely visible. They happen in seconds. The habit of assuming the worst before anything has happened. The habit of doubting yourself before you even begin. The habit of saying yes when every part you want to say no. The habit of believing that one mistake defines the whole day. These habits don't look like routines. They look like personality. That's why they become so difficult to question. Your subconscious loves efficiency. If it had to think carefully about every decision, you'd be exhausted before breakfast. So it creates shortcuts. You wake up, brush your teeth, lock the door, walk a familiar path. You hardly think about any of it. That same system also creates emotional shortcuts. Someone criticizes you. You immediately become defensive. A message goes unanswered. You assume you've done something wrong. An opportunity appears. You instantly think, someone else is probably better than me. The event changes. The reaction stays the same. Not because life keeps repeating itself, because your subconscious does. This is why people often say, I don't know why I keep doing this. The truth is, part of them does know. Their subconscious has simply been repeating the same response for so long that it no longer feels like a choice. It feels automatic. Think about a path through a forest. The first person who walks across it has to push branches aside. The ground is uneven. Every step requires effort. But if hundreds of people continue walking the same route, something changes. The grass disappears. The soil becomes firm. Soon, everyone naturally follows a path because it's easier than creating a new one. Your brain builds pathways the same way. Every repeated reaction strengthens a mental trail. Every repeated belief makes that trail easier to follow. Eventually, your mind chooses it without asking, not because it's the best path, because it's the easiest. Here's where many people become discouraged. They finally decide to change. They react differently once, twice, maybe even for a week. Then one stressful day arrives, and suddenly they're back to their old behavior. They think, nothing has changed. But something has changed. They simply misunderstood what growth looks like. The old path still exists. It has been used for years. The new path has only just begun. Of course, your mind finds the older one more easily. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're learning. Picture someone learning to drive. At first, every movement requires attention. Mirrors, steering, brakes, traffic. It feels overwhelming. Years later, they arrive home and barely remember the journey. The subconscious took over. The same thing happens with emotional habits. At first, choosing patience instead of anger feels unnatural. Choosing courage instead of avoidance feels uncomfortable. Choosing gratitude instead of complaint feels forced. Then one day, without noticing exactly what happened, those responses become easier. Not because life became simpler, because your subconscious learned a new route. There's another reason old habits are so powerful. They often provide immediate relief, not lasting peace. Relief. Overthinking creates the illusion of control. Avoiding difficult conversations creates temporary comfort. Scrolling endlessly distracts you from uncomfortable emotions. Procrastination allows you to postpone the possibility of failure. Each habit solves a problem for a few minutes, then quietly creates a much larger one. The subconscious remembers that brief feeling of relief. Next time discomfort appears, it suggests the same solution, again and again, until relief becomes a prison. Have you ever noticed how some people promise themselves they'll only check social media for 5 minutes? An hour disappears. Not because they lack intelligence, because their subconscious associated scrolling with escape. Or someone promises they'll stop worrying so much. Then a problem appears, and their mind immediately starts replaying every possible disaster. They believe worrying is helping. In reality, it's simply familiar. This is why willpower alone rarely creates lasting change. Willpower is strongest when you're rested, calm, and focused. Habits operate even when you're tired. That's why habits almost always defeat motivation. Not because motivation is weak. Because habits don't ask for permission. They simply begin. The encouraging news is that habits can be interrupted, not by fighting them, by noticing the moment they start. Every habit has a doorway, a small moment before the automatic reaction takes over. For someone, that doorway is stress. For someone else, it's loneliness. For another, it's boredom. If you never recognize the doorway, you'll spend years wondering why the habit feels unstoppable. But once you see it, everything changes. You realize the habit didn't appear out of nowhere. It followed a pattern. Patterns can be studied, and anything that can be studied can eventually be changed. Here's a simple example. A person comes home after a difficult day. Without thinking, they open the refrigerator. They're not hungry. They're emotionally exhausted. The food isn't solving hunger. It's trying to solve stress. Now, compare that with someone who notices the same feeling and pauses. Instead of immediately opening the refrigerator, they sit quietly for 2 minutes. They ask themselves, what do I actually need right now? Sometimes the answer is rest. Sometimes it's connection. Sometimes it's simply a deep breath. The emotion hasn't disappeared, but the automatic pattern has been interrupted. That interruption is more powerful than it seems. Because every time you interrupt an old habit, you're teaching your subconscious something new. You're saying, there is another way. At first, your subconscious won't believe you. It has years of evidence supporting the old habit. That's okay. Keep showing it. Again and again. Eventually, repetition becomes proof. One of the greatest misunderstandings about change is believing that every day should feel equally inspiring. It won't. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll feel like you've made no progress at all. Those ordinary days matter the most, because the subconscious is always watching what you repeat when no one is celebrating you. That is where new habits are truly born, not in moments of excitement, in moments of consistency. Before you finish listening today, try something small. Think of one habit that keeps pulling you backward, not the habit itself. The feeling that comes just before it. Perhaps it's stress. Perhaps it's boredom. Perhaps it's rejection. Perhaps it's uncertainty. The next time that feeling appears, don't rush to fix it. Simply pause for 10 seconds. Take one slow breath. Then quietly ask yourself, what am I about to do, and what am I actually looking for? That single question creates space. And in that space, your subconscious begins realizing it has choices. Real freedom rarely arrives all at once. It appears in small pauses that slowly become new patterns. One interruption, one better response, one repeated decision, until the person you used to be no longer feels familiar. But habits are only one part of the story. Something even deeper decides which habits survive and which disappear. It is the emotion hidden beneath every decision you make. Most people spend their lives trying to control their actions without ever understanding the feelings driving them. In the next chapter, you'll uncover why emotions, not logic, hold a master key to your subconscious, and why learning to work with them instead of against them changes everything. Chapter 6. Your emotions are not the enemy. The emotion you're trying hardest to avoid is often the one trying to teach you something. Most of us spend years believing that peace comes from getting rid of uncomfortable feelings. We try to eliminate fear, silence sadness, escape anxiety, control anger. We search for the perfect routine, the perfect relationship, the perfect job, believing that if life becomes comfortable enough, difficult emotions will finally disappear. But they never do, not because you're doing something wrong, because emotions were never designed to disappear. They were designed to communicate. The problem is that most people confuse a message with an identity. They don't say, I'm feeling anxious. They say, I am an anxious person. They don't say, I'm experiencing fear. They say, I'm just a fearful person. That small difference changes everything. One describes a passing visitor. The other builds a permanent home. Your subconscious listens carefully to those descriptions. It quietly asks, is this who we are? And once it believes the answer is yes, it begins organizing your life around that identity. That's why emotions become so powerful. Not because of how they feel, because of the meaning you attach to them. Think about standing in line before giving an important presentation. Your heart beats faster. Your hands feel warm. Your breathing changes. One person thinks, I'm nervous. This is going to go badly. Another thinks, my body is preparing me to perform. The physical sensations are almost identical. The interpretation is completely different. The subconscious reacts to the interpretation, not the heartbeat, not the sweaty hands, not the butterflies. Meaning shapes emotion more than emotion shapes meaning. That explains something you probably experienced. Have you ever looked back at something that once felt like the end of the world, only to smile at it years later? At the time, the emotion felt overwhelming. Today, it feels like a lesson. The event didn't change. Its meaning did. And with it, the emotion quietly transformed. This is one of the subconscious mind's greatest secrets. It stores emotional meaning more deeply than it stores facts. You may forget exactly what someone said to you years ago, but you remember how they made you feel. You may forget the details of a difficult season, but your body remembers the tension. That's why certain places, songs, or even familiar smells can suddenly awaken emotions you thought had disappeared. The subconscious keeps emotional memories alive long after conscious memories begin to fade. This can work against you, or it can become one of your greatest strengths. Consider someone who was laughed at while speaking in front of class. Years later, every presentation feels strangely uncomfortable. Logically, they know they're no longer that child. Emotionally, their subconscious still associates speaking with embarrassment. The past quietly enters the present, not because it refuses to let go, because it was never fully understood. Here's where many people make life harder than it needs to be. They fight their emotions. When fear appears, they become afraid of being afraid. When sadness appears, they become frustrated that they're sad. When anxiety arrives, they panic about the anxiety itself. One emotion becomes two, then three. Soon the original feeling is buried beneath layers of resistance. The subconscious notices all that struggle and quietly concludes, this emotion must be dangerous. The next time it appears, the reaction becomes even stronger. But something remarkable happens when you stop treating emotions as enemies. You begin asking different questions. Not, how do I make this disappear? But, why has this feeling appeared? Curiosity changes the entire conversation. Think about a warning light in a car. Most people wouldn't cover the light with tape and continue driving. They would want to know what the light is trying to say. Emotions work the same way. Fear might be telling you that something important is about to happen. Guilt might be reminding you that one of your actions doesn't match your values. Loneliness may be asking you to reconnect instead of pretending you don't need anyone. Even anger has something to teach. Sometimes it points toward a boundary you've been ignoring for too long. The emotion itself isn't the problem. Ignoring its message often is. This doesn't mean every emotion tells the truth. Far from it. Fear may warn you about opportunities that aren't actually dangerous. Shame may repeat stories that no longer belong to you. Anxiety may predict disasters that never happen. Emotions are real, but they are not always accurate. Learning that difference is one of the greatest forms of freedom. You can respect a feeling without allowing it to make every decision. That's emotional maturity, not becoming emotionless, becoming emotionally aware. Think about someone learning to surf. They don't stop the waves. They learn how to move with them. Life works the same way. Trying to eliminate every uncomfortable emotion is like trying to stop the ocean. Learning how to respond wisely is far more powerful. The subconscious pays close attention to those responses. Every time you sit with discomfort instead of running from it, every time you choose patience instead of panic, Every time you allow an emotion to pass without letting it control your behavior, you're teaching your subconscious a new lesson. You're saying, "We can handle this." Those 4 words slowly transform everything. Because confidence isn't created by avoiding difficult emotions. It's created by surviving them, again and again, until your subconscious stops treating them as emergencies. One day you'll notice something surprising. The situations that once overwhelmed you no longer have the same power. Not because life became easier, because you became steadier. The storm didn't disappear. You learned how to stand in the rain. Here's something simple to practice today. The next time a strong emotion appears, resist the urge to immediately explain it away or escape from it. Pause for a moment. Take one slow breath. Then quietly finish the sentence. Right now I'm feeling. Name the emotion, not the story, not the reason, just the feeling. Then ask, what is this emotion trying to protect? Don't force an answer. Simply become curious. Sometimes the answer will arrive immediately. Sometimes it won't arrive until much later. Both are perfectly okay. The goal isn't to solve every emotion. The goal is to stop fearing them. Because emotions are like weather. They move, they change, they pass. But the person observing them can remain steady. And once you learn that your emotions don't have to control you, another realization begins to emerge. If emotions are messages, who is listening? Who is the quiet observer behind every thought, every feeling, every reaction you've ever had? Most people spend their entire lives answering that question without ever asking it. In the next chapter, you'll discover the difference between the voice in your mind and the deeper awareness that hears it. A distinction so powerful that, once you see it, you'll never experience your thoughts in quite the same way again. Chapter 7. The Quiet Observer Within You. Not every thought you think belongs to you. That sentence may sound impossible at first. After all, if a thought appears inside your own mind, who else could it belong to? But pause for a moment and notice something you've probably never questioned. If you can hear your thoughts, who is doing the listening? That question has fascinated philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual teachers for centuries. Not because it is mysterious, because it changes everything once you truly understand it. Most people spend their entire lives believing they are their thoughts. A single negative idea appears, and they immediately believe it. I'm going to fail. Nobody really cares about me. I'll never change. The thought arrives. The emotion follows. The behavior changes. The day takes a different direction. All because one sentence passed through the mind. But have you ever noticed that your thoughts never stop changing? 1 hour you feel hopeful. The next hour you feel discouraged. One day you're confident. The next you're full of doubt. If your thoughts constantly change, how can they possibly define who you are? Clouds move across the sky all day long. Some are bright. Some are dark. Some bring storms. Others disappear without leaving a trace. Yet through all those changes, the sky remains. Your mind is filled with passing thoughts. Your deeper awareness is the sky. Most people spend their lives chasing clouds. Very few learn to become the sky. That difference is the beginning of freedom. Think about the last time you became angry. In that moment, it probably felt as though anger was your entire world. Then a few hours later, the feeling faded. You laughed. You relaxed. Life continued. Where did the anger go? If anger were truly your identity, it couldn't disappear. The same is true for fear. Sadness, jealousy, self-doubt. They visit. They stay for a while. Then they leave. The observer remains. Your subconscious doesn't automatically know this distinction. It reacts to whatever receives your attention. If every fearful thought is treated as truth, your subconscious begins organizing your life around fear. But something remarkable happens the moment you observe a thought instead of obeying it. A small space appears. Inside that space, choice returns. That pause may last only a second, but a second is enough. Enough to choose patience instead of anger. Enough to choose courage instead of avoidance. Enough to choose curiosity instead of panic. Real freedom rarely arrives as one dramatic breakthrough. It often begins as one quiet pause. Think about sitting beside a busy road. Cars pass constantly. Some are noisy. Some are beautiful. Some are damaged. You don't chase every car. You simply watch them pass. Thoughts can be treated the same way. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every thought deserves your belief. Not every thought deserves your action. Some thoughts are simply mental traffic. The problem is that most people jump into the first passing vehicle they see. A worried thought appears. They climb inside. Soon they're imagining disasters that haven't happened. A critical thought appears. They climb inside again. Now they're replaying old mistakes. Hours disappear. Energy disappears. Peace disappears. Not because life became worse. Because they never questioned whether they needed to follow every thought that appeared. Your subconscious becomes stronger wherever your attention repeatedly goes. Attention is like sunlight. Whatever receives it continues growing. Spend years feeding thoughts of fear. Fear grows. Spend years feeding thoughts of resentment. Resentment grows. Spend years feeding thoughts of possibility. Possibility grows. The subconscious doesn't decide what deserves attention. You do, even if you haven't realized it yet. This is why awareness is so powerful. Awareness interrupts automation. Without awareness, the subconscious simply repeats yesterday. With awareness, something new becomes possible. There is a quiet strength in noticing without immediately reacting. Picture someone criticizing you. The old pattern activates. Your heartbeat rises. Defensiveness appears. A sharp reply forms in your mind. In the past, that reply would have escaped your mouth before you even realized what was happening. Now something different happens. You notice it. You silently say, "I'm noticing anger." Not, "I am angry." That tiny change creates distance. The emotion is no longer driving the car. You're back in the driver's seat. Nothing outside has changed. Everything inside has. This doesn't mean you'll never experience negative thoughts again. That's not the goal. A peaceful mind isn't an empty mind. It's a mind that no longer believes every sentence it produces. Even the wisest people experience doubt. The difference is that they don't build homes inside every fearful thought. They let thoughts come. They let thoughts go. And they choose carefully which ones deserve a place in their lives. There's a beautiful simplicity in that. You don't need to win an argument against every negative thought. You don't need to force yourself to think positively every minute. Sometimes the wisest response is simply, "That's an interesting thought." Then letting it pass, without chasing it, without fighting it, without becoming it. The subconscious learns from repetition. Every time you observe instead of automatically reacting, you're teaching it something new. You're showing it that not every emotion is an emergency. Not every fear is a warning. Not every memory belongs in the present. Slowly, your mind begins trusting your awareness more than your impulses. That is where lasting calm begins. Here's something simple to practice before the day ends. For just 1 minute, sit somewhere quiet. Close your eyes if it feels comfortable. Don't try to stop your thoughts. Don't try to create peaceful thoughts. Simply notice them. As each one appears, silently say, "Thinking." Nothing more. Just thinking. Watch the next thought arrive. Then the next. Soon you'll notice something remarkable. Thoughts come and go on their own, but the one observing them remains still. That stillness has always been there. It was simply hidden beneath the noise. The more often you return to that quiet observer, the less power automatic thoughts have over your decisions. The subconscious slowly learns a new habit, not reacting immediately, not believing everything it hears, creating space before action, and inside that space, a different life quietly begins. But awareness alone is not enough. You can recognize your thoughts and still remain surrounded by people, places, and influences that constantly reinforce your old programming. The subconscious is always learning from what it repeatedly sees, whether you realize it or not. In the next chapter, you will discover why your environment is silently rewriting your mind every single day, and how changing what's around you may be one of the fastest ways to change what's within you. Chapter 8. Your environment is programming you every day. You become more like your surroundings than you realize, not because you're weak, not because you lack discipline, but because your subconscious is always asking one quiet question: what is normal here? It asks that question every single day, and whatever answer it receives repeatedly, It begins to believe. Think about how easily people adapt, move to a new country, and over time, your speech begins to change. Spend enough time with optimistic people, and your conversations slowly become more hopeful. Spend enough time around constant negativity, and one day you catch yourself complaining in exactly the same way. It rarely happens overnight. It happens one ordinary day at a time. That is how the subconscious learns. Not through dramatic moments, through repeated exposure. Most people believe they are making independent decisions. In reality, many of those decisions were quietly suggested by the environment long before they became conscious choices. Consider something as simple as your phone. Perhaps you only meant to check one message. 10 minutes later, you're watching videos you never planned to watch. Half an hour disappears. You didn't wake up intending to lose your focus. Your environment simply kept offering one distraction after another. Your subconscious followed the path that required the least effort. This isn't about technology. It's about attention. Whatever constantly competes for your attention eventually competes for your identity. Your mind becomes whatever it practices noticing. If every morning begins with alarming headlines, endless comparisons, arguments between strangers, and opinions from people you've never met, your subconscious quietly absorbs more than information. It absorbs emotional patterns. Urgency becomes normal. Comparison becomes normal. Outrage becomes normal. Without realizing it, you begin carrying emotions that were never yours to begin with. Then you wonder why your mind feels restless. The subconscious cannot always distinguish between what you experience directly and what you repeatedly consume. That's why a single conversation can change your mood. A single book can change your perspective. A single encouraging mentor can change your future. Exposure matters more than most people realize. Think about walking into two different homes. In one home, people speak with respect. They listen before responding. Problems are discussed calmly. Laughter appears often. You leave feeling lighter. Now, picture another home. Every conversation is criticism. Every mistake becomes an argument. Every success is met with jealousy. You leave carrying a heaviness you can't quite explain. Nothing physical followed you out the door, but something entered your subconscious. Environments leave fingerprints on the mind. This is why changing your life sometimes requires changing what constantly surrounds you. Not because people are trying to hold you back, but because familiarity quietly shapes expectation. If everyone around you believes success is impossible, hope begins to feel unrealistic. If everyone around you believes growth is normal, excuses become much harder to believe. Your subconscious is always collecting evidence about what kind of life is possible. Choose that evidence carefully. There's another environment people often forget, the one inside their home. Look around the room where you spend the most time. What is it teaching you? A cluttered desk quietly encourages distraction. A television constantly running teaches your attention to scatter. A bookshelf invites curiosity. A notebook left open invites reflection. Small details seem insignificant until you repeat them every day. Your subconscious notices patterns long before your conscious mind does. That's why tiny changes often produce surprisingly large results over time. A single book beside your bed instead of your phone. A glass of water waiting for you in the morning. A journal place where you'll naturally see it. A reminder written on your mirror. None of these changes transform your life overnight. Together, they quietly reshape your daily decisions. And daily decisions eventually become identity. Think about a garden. If you plant healthy seeds but never remove the weeds eventually take over. Your mind works much the same way. You cannot fill it with wisdom for 30 minutes each day and then spend the remaining hours feeding it fear, comparison, and constant distraction. The subconscious doesn't only remember what inspired you. It remembers what surrounded you most often. This explains why some people feel motivated after reading a great book, only to lose that motivation 2 days later. The book planted a seed. Their environment kept watering the weeds. No seed survives after long. Fortunately, the opposite is also true. A supportive environment quietly strengthens good habits. Think about trying to eat healthier. If your kitchen is filled with food that constantly tempts you, every decision requires effort. Now imagine walking into a kitchen where healthier choices are the easiest choices. The same person suddenly appears more disciplined. Did they become stronger overnight? Probably not. Their environment simply stopped working against them. This principle reaches far beyond food. Want to become calmer? Spend more time in places that create stillness. Want to become wiser? Surround yourself with ideas that challenge you to grow. Want to become more hopeful? Listen to people who build instead of people who constantly complain. Your environment becomes your silent teacher, even when no one is speaking. Here's something else that's easy to overlook. Not every environment is physical. Some are digital. Every account you follow, every video you repeatedly watch, every conversation you return to, every notification demanding your attention, they're all shaping your subconscious. Little by little, ask yourself a simple question. If someone watched everything I consume each day, what kind of person would they expect me to become? That question can reveal more than you might expect, because your future isn't shaped only by your goals. It's shaped by what repeatedly enters your mind. The encouraging news is that you don't need to redesign your entire life today. Small adjustments are enough. Move one distracting app off your home screen. Place one meaningful book where you'll naturally reach for it. Spend 10 more minutes with someone who inspires you. Spend 10 fewer minutes with content that leaves you feeling empty. Tiny changes rarely feel powerful in the moment. The subconscious disagrees. It learns through repetition, not intensity. Before the day ends, choose one part of your environment that quietly pulls you away from the person you want to become. Just one. Then ask yourself, how can I make the better choice slightly easier and the unhealthy choice slightly harder? Don't chase perfection. Simply change the path, because the subconscious almost always follows the easiest road. Make the right road easier to walk, and you'll be surprised how naturally your life begins to change. As your environment improves, something remarkable begins happening inside you. The old version of yourself slowly loses its influence. A new identity starts feeling familiar. A new way of thinking becomes natural. But there is one final piece of the puzzle. Even with a healthier environment, wiser thoughts, and better habits, lasting transformation requires one thing above all else. You must become the kind of person who no longer waits to feel ready. In the next chapter, you'll discover how your subconscious finally accepts a new identity, not through one extraordinary breakthrough, but through the quiet power of repeated evidence that says, "This is who I am now." Chapter 9. Becoming the person your mind believes. Your life rarely changes the day you make a decision. It changes the day your subconscious finally believes that decision is real. That's why so many promises fade. Not because they lack sincerity, but because they were never supported by enough evidence. You can tell yourself 100 times, I'm going to be more confident. But if every action still comes from fear, your subconscious quietly reaches a different conclusion. Nothing has really changed. It always trusts evidence more than intention. This is one of the simplest truths about personal transformation. Your subconscious does not believe your words. It believes your repeated actions. Think about trust between two people. If someone tells you they're dependable but constantly breaks their promises, eventually you stop believing what they say. Now think about your relationship with yourself. How many promises have you made only to quietly abandon them? I'll start on Monday. This is the last time. Tomorrow will be different. Every broken promise sends a message, not to the world, to your subconscious. It slowly begins believing we don't follow through. The painful part is that this belief doesn't stay attached to one habit. It spreads. Soon you hesitate before setting new goals because somewhere inside you've stopped trusting yourself. This is why rebuilding self-trust is more important than chasing motivation. Self-trust is built exactly the way trust between two people is built. One kept promise at a time. Nothing dramatic. Nothing complicated. Just consistency. Think about someone learning to play the piano. The first practice session changes almost nothing. Neither does the second, or the 10th. But after hundreds of quiet repetitions, something remarkable happens. Their hands begin moving without conscious effort. What once felt impossible becomes natural. Identity grows the same way. You don't become a confident person because you felt confident one morning. You become confident because you repeatedly acted with courage, even when confidence hadn't arrived yet. Your subconscious watched those moments carefully. Eventually, it concluded, this must be who we are now. That's how identities change, not through inspiration, through evidence. This is why waiting to feel ready is one of the biggest traps people fall into. They believe confidence comes first, then action. Life usually works in the opposite direction. Action comes first. Confidence quietly follows. Consider someone who wants to become healthier. If they believe, I'm trying to exercise, their behavior remains uncertain. Some days, yes. Some days, no. But if they begin thinking, I'm someone who takes care of my body, every small decision starts reinforcing that identity. Taking a walk, drinking more water, going to bed earlier. Each action becomes another vote for the person they're becoming. Notice something important. None of those actions need to be perfect. Your subconscious isn't counting perfection. It's collecting patterns. Most people underestimate the power of tiny victories. They wait for dramatic breakthroughs. A promotion, a complete transformation, a life-changing moment. Meanwhile, the subconscious is quietly paying attention to something much smaller. Did you keep today's promise? Did you tell the truth when it was uncomfortable? Did you choose patience instead of anger? Did you return to your routine after making a mistake? Those ordinary moments carry extraordinary weight because they answer the question your subconscious asks every day. Who are we becoming? Here's another truth that often surprises people. Missing one day rarely changes your identity. Quitting does. Everyone has difficult days. Everyone loses focus. Everyone falls back into old habits sometimes. The difference is what happens next. One person says, I knew I couldn't do it. Another says, I'll begin again tomorrow. The mistake is identical. The identity is completely different. Your subconscious isn't looking for someone who never stumbles. It's looking for someone who always returns. That return builds resilience, and resilience builds confidence. Think about a tree growing through concrete. It doesn't become strong because life was easy. It becomes strong because it keeps growing despite resistance. The same is true for you. Strength isn't created by avoiding setbacks. It's created by returning after them, again and again, until returning becomes automatic. One day you'll realize something has quietly changed. The habits that once required discipline no longer feel like work. Protecting your peace feels natural. Speaking honestly feels natural. Keeping promises to yourself feels natural. The old version of you starts feeling unfamiliar. That's one of the clearest signs your subconscious has accepted a new identity. The battle becomes quieter, not because you become perfect, because you become aligned. There's something beautiful about alignment. When your beliefs, actions, and values begin moving in the same direction, life requires less internal conflict. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop needing constant motivation. You simply become the kind of person who does what matters, quietly, consistently, without needing applause. This is how lasting change often looks. From the outside, almost nothing seems dramatic. Inside, everything has shifted. The person who once reacted now pauses. The person who once doubted now acts. The person who once feared change now expects growth. No single day created that transformation. Thousands of small decisions did. Here's something simple you can begin today. Choose one promise so small that it feels impossible to fail. It could be reading one page, taking one mindful breath before checking your phone, writing one sentence in a journal, walking for 5 minutes. Whatever you choose, keep it. Not because the action itself will change your life, because keeping the promise tells your subconscious, you can trust me. Tomorrow, keep it again. Then again, you are doing far more than building a habit. You are rebuilding your relationship with yourself. And that relationship influences every other relationship you'll ever have. One day you'll look back and realize the greatest transformation wasn't becoming someone new. It was finally becoming someone you could rely on. Someone whose actions match their intentions. Someone whose subconscious no longer fought against the future they wanted to create. And when that happens, Success, confidence, peace, and discipline stop feeling like distant goals. They begin feeling like home. But there is one final truth that brings this entire journey together. It is the difference between living on autopilot and living by choice, between reacting to life and creating it with intention. In the final chapter, you'll discover what it truly means to rewrite your subconscious code and why the greatest change you'll ever experience isn't becoming a different person, but finally waking up to the one you've had the potential to be all along. Chapter 10. The Life Waiting on the Other Side of Awareness. Your life can change long before anyone else notices. There may come a morning when nothing around you looks different. You wake up in the same room. You follow the same routine. You speak to the same people. From the outside, it appears to be an ordinary day, but inside, something is no longer the same. The thoughts that once controlled you no longer receive your automatic agreement. The fears that once stopped you now pause at the door. The habits that once felt impossible to escape begin losing their grip. No announcement is made. No one applauds. Yet this quiet shift is often the beginning of a completely different life. Most people spend years waiting for life to change before they change themselves. They believe confidence will come after success. Peace will come after everything is under control. Discipline will come when motivation finally arrives. But you've seen a different truth throughout this journey. The subconscious does not wait for the outside world to change first. It changes when you repeatedly give it new evidence about who you are. That is where real transformation begins, not in your circumstances, in your interpretation of them. Think about two people walking through the same storm. One spends the entire journey asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" The other asks, "What is this moment teaching me?" The rain falls on both. The wind pushes against both. Yet one grows bitter. The other grows wiser. Life doesn't always decide who you become. The meaning you give your experiences often does. That may be one of the most empowering ideas you'll ever discover. Because if meaning can change, then your future can change. You cannot rewrite every chapter of your past. You cannot erase every painful memory. You cannot control every person who enters or leaves your life. But you can decide what those experiences will mean from this day forward. That decision quietly rewrites your subconscious, one interpretation at a time. As you've listened through these chapters, you probably noticed something. The greatest prison was never your circumstances. It was unconscious repetition. The same thoughts, the same reactions, the same stories, repeated until they felt permanent. But now you know something many people never realize. A thought is not an order. An emotion is not an identity. A habit is not a life sentence. A difficult past is not a prediction of the future. Those truths create space. And inside that space, freedom begins. Perhaps you're wondering, how do I make sure this lasts? The answer isn't found in doing something extraordinary. It's found in returning to ordinary moments with greater awareness. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to notice your reactions. Every challenge becomes a chance to choose a different response. Every setback becomes another opportunity to practice the identity you're building. Transformation is an event. It's a relationship with your own mind. And like every meaningful relationship, it grows through attention, not perfection. There will still be difficult days. Days when old thoughts return. Days when fear speaks loudly. Days when your patience disappears. Those days do not erase your progress. In fact, they often reveal it, because the person you used to be would have reacted without noticing. The person you're becoming notices first, then chooses. That pause is evidence of growth. Never underestimate it. Many people believe freedom means never struggling again. Real freedom is something quieter. It's knowing that your struggle no longer controls your direction. You may still feel fear, but fear no longer decides. You may still experience doubt, but doubt no longer has a final word. You may still remember your past, but your past no longer writes your future. That is emotional freedom. That is mental freedom. That is what happens when the subconscious becomes your partner instead of your prison. Here's something worth carrying with you long after this audiobook ends. Every morning, before the world tells you who to be, take one quiet moment and ask yourself, who am I choosing to become today? Not forever, not for the next year, just today. Then allow your smallest actions to answer that question. Keep one promise. Speak one honest sentence. Choose one courageous response. Show one act of kindness. Protect one moment of peace. These moments may appear insignificant. Your subconscious sees them differently. It collects them. It remembers them. It quietly builds a new identity from them. One day, without realizing exactly when it happened, you'll notice something extraordinary. The life you once hoped for has quietly become the life you live. Not because luck found you, not because everything became easy, because you became different, not through force, not through perfection, but through awareness, through repetition, through patience, through choosing, again and again, to become someone your subconscious could finally recognize as strong, peaceful, disciplined, and free. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire journey is this. You were never becoming someone else. You were removing the layers of fear, doubt, conditioning, and unconscious patterns that had hidden who you truly were all along. The confident person wasn't waiting somewhere in the future. The peaceful person wasn't reserved for someone more fortunate. The disciplined person wasn't born different. They were already within you. They were simply waiting for your subconscious to stop believing the old story. Now you know that stories can be rewritten. Habits can be replaced. Beliefs can be questioned. Identity can evolve. And every new day offers another opportunity to write a better line of code. As this audiobook comes to an end, don't measure its value by how inspired you feel right now. Measure it by the conversations you have with yourself tomorrow, by the choices you make when no one is watching, by the way you respond the next time life tests you, because that is where your new subconscious code will truly be written. And years from now, when you look back at the person you used to be, you may struggle to recognize them, not because you escaped your past, but because you finally stopped allowing it to decide your future. The code has changed. Now let your life reveal what that new code can create. Conclusion. The story you tell yourself begins again tomorrow. There is one final truth I want to leave with you. Tomorrow morning, your subconscious will wake up before your ambitions do, before you remember this audiobook, before you think about your goals, before you decide what kind of day you're going to have. Your old programming will quietly begin speaking. It will offer you familiar thoughts, familiar fears, familiar excuses, not because you failed, because that is what it has practiced for years. The real question has never been whether those thoughts will return. The real question is this: will you believe them again? Everything we've explored together has pointed toward one simple discovery. You are not trapped by your past. You are not trapped by your habits. You are not trapped by your fears. You are only trapped by the stories you continue to accept without questioning. The moment you pause, the moment you notice, the moment you choose differently, the code begins to change. One thought, one decision, one ordinary day at a time. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel fearless. Don't wait until life becomes easier, because your future isn't built on the days you feel inspired. It's built on the days you quietly refuse to become the person you used to be. Years from now, people may look at your confidence and call you lucky. They may admire your discipline. They may wonder how you became so calm under pressure. They won't see the invisible work. They won't see the conversations you had with yourself when no one was listening. They won't see the moments when you chose growth instead of comfort. But you will, because you'll know that every lasting transformation began with one decision: to stop living on autopilot. If this audiobook has done its job, it hasn't given you a new life. It has given you a new way to see the one you already have. And once you truly see your subconscious, you can never unsee it. From this moment forward, you'll notice the patterns. You'll hear the old stories. You'll recognize the habits before they take over. And every time you do, you'll have a choice. That choice is your freedom. But remember this: awareness fades if it isn't renewed. Just like a garden needs care, your mind needs regular attention. One inspiring conversation is enough. One powerful idea is enough. Growth isn't something you finish. It's something you practice. That's why this isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning of a new one. If these ideas challenge the way you think, if they helped you understand yourself a little more deeply, if they gave you even one moment where you stopped and thought, "I've never seen my mind this way before," then don't let this be the last conversation we have. Subscribe to this channel, not because you owe us anything, but because every new audiobook is designed to help you understand your mind, master your emotions, strengthen your discipline, and become the person your future is quietly asking you to become. Thousands of people listen. Only a few choose to keep growing. Be one of them, because the person you'll become 6 months from now will largely be shaped by the ideas you repeatedly allow into your mind. Choose those ideas wisely. And if this journey has been valuable to you, take one small action before you leave. Subscribe. It costs nothing, but it may become one of those tiny decisions that quietly changes the direction of your life. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until our next audiobook, protect your mind, question your stories, keep your promises to yourself, and never forget, the most powerful code you'll ever rewrite is the one running inside you.